Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Our gratitude to Allah for having able us to be here again after a few days of break. My apologies for I was not feeling too well, still not well. So hopefully, inshallah, that I can be better, inshallah, for Friday and for Saturday, inshallah. For we have the Badr Majlis coming on, inshallah. So Alhamdulillah, without further ado, may this be a kafara for all of us. We're at page 24, if I'm not mistaken, inshallah, of the Book of Lives of Men, which I believe has brought a lot of insights for us. There's a lot of barakah in it as well for Imam al-Haddad, whom we hope that we receive his barakah in this month of Ramadan. Inshallah, let's read. Imam Malik used to say, we know people who studied until they were 40, after which they would so occupy themselves with practicing what they knew that they had no free time left to turn to anything worldly. When Imam Shafi'i, rahmatullah alayh, reached 40, he began to walk with a staff. And when questioned about it, he used to say, to remind myself that I am a traveler. By God, I now see myself like a cage bird who is extricated himself until only his heel remain caught up in the cage. Since this is now my condition, I have no residual desire to remain in this world. And I grant no permission to any of my companions to give me anything of the world or mention any of its affair except that which is legally necessary to me. I say, God is my sufficiency. May God make all brethren thus. Ameen. Wahab bin Munabbih, may Allah have mercy on him, said, I have read somewhere that each morning a herald announced in the fourth heavens, O people of 40, you are a crop whose harvest is high. O people of 50, what have you sent ahead of you? And what have you kept back? O people of 60, you have no excuse. Would that creature had never been created. When created, they know why they are created. The hour has come to you, so beware. Now it's interesting that we're reading this in Ramadan, and I think it is not a coincidence. We live in a time where ignorance is at its peak, if I may say. And what more is that we we see this ignorance in the religion itself, and that many people are trying to use the deen to benefit their own agenda. And that's a problem. Everybody has an agenda in this day and age. And one of the, especially scholars, and I think one of the major critique of scholars is actually Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi himself. And a lot of what Imam al-Ghazali has written, and even when you read, text entry for Imam al-Ghazali, Bidayat al-Hidayah, he warned people not to seek knowledge for fame, and that to seek knowledge only for the sake of Allah. Now, this was something that Imam al-Ghazali himself had gone through. So when Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi was very famous in his early career after he has finished his studies with Imam al-Juwayni, it was mentioned by scholars who've seen him. They say that he will be very arrogant, one of the most arrogant person. And no one could win him in a debate. No one could win Imam al-Ghazali in a debate. And if you come in and if you were to question, he'll put you down immediately. And he had that arrogance. And Imam al-Ghazali says in some of his books, he says, the last illness to be taken out is actually hubbur ri'as, yani the love for leadership. And many Sufis, there's one Sufi saying, he says, when I started teaching, I wanted to change the world. As I grown wiser, I wanted to change my family. And as I grown even wiser, I realized I only need to change myself. And this was attributed to Imam Bayazid al-Bustami. Now, when we read books like this that reminds us about the age of 40, like what Imam al-Haddad has mentioned, there is a certain hikmah that will come at the age of 40. And what rises at the age of 40 is a certain opening, a certain understanding in the aql and in the heart. And truly, for us to write at the age of 40 is when we understand to a certain degree the value of our shahada, the value of our shahada. And this is important part because the shahada is the core of a person. And in the witnessing, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. This is the core of a person. Now, what can we actually take out? How much can we reap from the shahada? Depends on the type of knowledge we have. And we see this in the works of Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayh, that when he, especially in his Ihya Ulumuddin, it starts from ignorance. How do you clarify ignorance? So that's why it's called Kitab al-Ilm. And he ends it with Kitab, the book on Zikr al-Maut. So there's 40 chapters. And 40 chapters. 40 chapters for you to prepare yourself from the time that we are ignorant until the time that we are going to meet death. And that is the reason why we should prepare ourselves. Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayh has given us a trial and tested way for us to prepare ourselves for maut. And Imam al-Ghazali explains this very beautifully. Now, I'm going to read from this book. It's called The Ethical Philosophy of Al-Ghazali. And it's a very good book, mashallah. The author takes from different books of Imam al-Ghazali and he summarizes it. And the one that I'm going to read from is called Knowledge and Morality. Knowledge and morality, which is actually an important topic, because once we reach 40, like Imam al-Haddad has mentioned, if you have reached 40 but you do not prepare yourself before that, for Jannah, then be prepared for Jahannam. Wala'udhu billah, may Allah protect us. And as I have mentioned in the previous sessions, we live in a very heedless dunya, a very hedonistic and narcissistic world, where even the religious scholars are governed by such attributes and characteristics. So Imam Ghazali says, knowledge is one of the cornerstones of, the author says, knowledge is one of the cornerstones of Al-Ghazali's ethical system. So what we're doing now is that we're not yet prepared. In that sense, this class doesn't talk much about how do you prepare for yourself, but this is the class where you take the knowledge. How are you going to use this knowledge to prepare yourself for what Imam al-Ghazali has mentioned as the final part in maut? So alhamdulillah, in this class we have different people from different age groups, from 20s to, and up the way till 40s, etc. The main thing that Imam Ghazali is advising us is to have ilm, knowledge, because through knowledge can we then have a proper ethical system. Yani ethics here is adab. And adab here means something that you discipline yourself with. Morality and good conduct are not possible without it. Yani knowledge. Knowledge results from the functioning of the intellect or reason, akal. Now akal, and we must understand, intellect here is not as what it is understood today. Intellect today is used as a very basic primary level of just deduction and logic. But Imam Ghazali had a far more superior understanding of aql. It is more mystical in its application and in its outcome. So it has a more depth in it. That's why when you read Imam Ghazali's Ihya, one of it, he talks about the inner dimensions of worship. So the brain, in a sense, the organ sees as making wudu, but the akal goes deeper and says that this is the purification of the heart. And this increases the morality and the ethics of the person, especially when he reaches 40. So this must start early. And when this starts early, when the person reaches 40, then can the person have these insights that what Imam al-Haddad has been talking about, which is the innate rational faculty of men, the faculty which distinguishes him from animals because it is a source of this kind of knowledge, which is of which animals are incapable. And this, the Sheikh talks from Ihya al-Muddin, فَلَوْلَا هُوَ مِنْ وَسَبَّحَ. And this is the first foundation, origin. Muhasibi, definitely. And then he quotes from Muhasibi. There's the footnote. Now, this kind of knowledge of which animals are incapable. Al-Ghazali sometimes uses qalb for akal. And that's the interesting part. Imam al-Ghazali actually says that the qalb and the akal cannot be separated. In fact, the qalb, the akal, the ruh, and the nafs is all one. Nafs is many levels by nafs. It don't just mean nafs al-ammara, but we have also nafs kamil. So when we reach 40, what we hope is that first things first, we have already set out that discipline. And that's why in the previous lecture, I was saying that from the age of adolescent to about 40, we must be busying ourselves with two things: knowledge and service, knowledge and khidmah. So when we reach 40, when we really start to, like what Imam Haddad said, that some of Imam Malik, at the age of 40, starts to practice it. Imam Shafi starts to practice it so much that they don't have any time for dunya, is because of the foundation that has been laid at a very early age. Yeah? And this is actually very fundamental. This is the way of the Salaf and how they prepare themselves for the life of the hereafter. Both are used by him for the precipient's mind. Qalb for him is a transcendental entity that perceives and knows. And this is in Ihya, volume 3. So it is qalb, it is something that is transcendent, and it perceives and it knows. So there is a way that the brain knows something, but the akal is far more superior than the brain. And one of the Chishti Mashayikh, they mentioned that the akal sends these images and it gives an impression on the brain, and that's how the jasadiyya works. So how is the akal, how are we connecting to our qalb? Is the qalb connected to the akal? And all this, if we look at the work of Imam al-Ghazali, it is through the Quran. How are we connected to the Quran and Sunnah? What knowledge do we have of these two major bodies of Islamic knowledge, which is the wealth of everything? So if you want to, you're talking about Sufiya, you're talking about Usul Fiqh, you're talking about fiqh, aqidah, etc. All of it goes back to the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So the more we understand the inner dimensions of the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and the inner dimensions of the Al-Quran Kareem, which is the criterion. This is one thing that the Quran is specialized in, is that through the language, which, we need to know balagha to understand Quran, not just Arabic. Balagha, because it gives spiritual, what's that word? It's an indication of two things. How do you understand these two things? You get what I'm trying to say? And then when because the Quran is not an easy text for us to just enter and read, one needs to be able to understand that there are layers to the words of Al-Quran. And that is the reason why one tafsir is never sufficient. There are multiple tafsirs. What we're reading a lot is just the translation, not even tafsir. That's why this is why Imam al-Ghazali and Imam al-Haddad and Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, they're very, very important, and their works have been used by teachers, by scholars over and over again, because it connects the seeker back to يعني the aql, which is connected to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. It stands for the whole mental life of men and comprises both the lower and the higher faculties. And that's the reason why there's a hadith that says if Allah wants to give religion to someone, He will give them knowledge. He will give them knowledge. So we must be sincere in asking Allah for knowledge, number one, and sincere in asking Allah to give us a guide. For us to understand this knowledge is not just to be able to take the dhikr and to be able to do suluk. Suluk without knowledge is have very little benefit. And we need knowledge so that the suluk, the wayfaring aspect becomes alive, and then it brings us back to the words of Allah. And when you recite the words of Allah, continuous fountains of meaning comes forth. And this is what should happen when we reach 40, in fact, because the body understands that it is that it is no longer much in power, although that is the peak of a person, but it starts to see that it is heading towards a seniority, and it's not like how it used to be as youth. So it comprises both the lower and the higher faculties. In this wider sense, the qalb, aql, became one part. It nevertheless is the highest faculty of the qalb. Its relation to the qalb is one of light of the sun to the other, to the sun, or the vision to the eye. And this is Imam al-Ghazali as well from Ihya al-Ulumuddin. So it is like the aql is like the light for the eye. If there isn't this nur, the eye can't see. So the aql, like I've said, it's far more superior. So having understand this journey of lives of men, it actually ignites the heart to be working towards nur. And the more we work towards nur, the more we create this discipline. And internally, in our thoughts, in our minds, in refining our intention, etc., the more we understand that we're actually basking ourselves in nur, and then we're turning away from ignorance. And that's why Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayhi starts with knowledge and he ends with death in his Ihya al-Ulumuddin. The former is the knowledge of the form in which the various objects of their experience and intuition are apprehended. It is the knowledge of self-evident principles. Such knowledge, though it begins with experience, is more than what it actually contains in experience. And as such, it is not based on experience. It is a priori. And this is also in Imam al-Ghazali. So this means it is not just, it is as such, it is not based on experience, it is a priori. Yani, it is more than what it contains. So it's not just the experience, but this is where knowledge becomes the knowledge of kashaf. And that's why in the way of tasawwuf, it starts with ma'rifah, to know. And after we understand ma'rifah, we become people who do mushahada, people who witness. What do they witness? The knowledge that they know. Yani here, the knowledge of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. And when they are always in the state of mushahada, the next step is that they begin the journey of mukashafa, the process of unveiling. So it's not just the experience, it is not just the knowledge, but it is an experience of the knowledge at a very superior level. And this is what people who prepared themselves before 40, when they reach 40 with this, are they able to experience the sweetness of Iman? And hopefully that will be the reason that will turn them back from the what do you call that? The inability to do zuhud, the detachment from dunya, which is one of Imam al-Ghazali's main focus in most of his works, is that because people are so drowned in dunya that they cannot do zuhud. And one of the problems we have today is people don't know how to be on their own. They cannot be left alone. They don't know how to be in a state of uzla. And that's the reason why Imam al-Ghazali has a chapter on uzla in Ihya al-Ulumuddin. Many Mashaykh, Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, Qaddas Allah Aziz, Khaja Mu'inuddin Chishti, Shaykh Shihabuddin in his Awarif al-Ma'arif, They all talk about the importance of uzla. So it is not just for the elites of the Muslims, but it is actually for all Muslims to be able to be on their own for a period of time, and they don't feel anxious, or they don't feel uh, any yeah, anxious is the word, because when you're on your own, shaitan is easy to disturb you. So how do you prepare yourself to be on your own? Because at the end of it, death, you're going to face death on yourself. And that's what Imam al-Ghazali is, training us. And this is a path that he himself took. A person cannot be in two places at the same time. We make a statement which is true for all time, though our observation is limited to the present time. Okay, I'm going to skip that. It talks about existential knowledge and the knowledge of objects and events attained through experience and intuition. The existential knowledge is important as well. It comprises the content of knowledge in a contradistinction to its form. Existential knowledge, again, is of two kinds, phenomenal and spiritual. The former is the knowledge of the material world, while the latter is the spiritual realities. So knowledge, at the end of it, the real knowledge, is the knowledge of mukashafa. It's not just the knowledge that we have through text. And this is what Imam al-Ghazali talks about, ilm laduni. He has a book that's just khusus on this, on knowledge of laduniya. And this is, but how do we get there? Like, scholars says, people always say, oh, this is for the khas. But what we must understand, that the way of the khas is not close to the awam. The way of the khas is not close to the awam. Is how far the awam wants to seek knowledge to be the people of the elite. By elites, we do not mean by elites, we do not mean that you are elite in a society or in a special class. No, but elite here means to be experiencing al-laduni. And often the case, a lot of people of Tariqah also, they try to experience al-laduni and not being able to differentiate with kathra, any thoughts. And of course, this requires the sheikh, this requires the proper ilm, and they cannot achieve ilm laduni, they cannot achieve that unless they're able, they have laid the foundation, the essence of being able to differentiate the thoughts. The kathara of nafsu, the kathara of waswas from shaitan, the kathara from malaika, the kathara from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the whisperings of Rabbaniya. So the kathara of nafsu is always telling you that it wants that one thing. It's nafs. And the kathara of shaitan is that it distracts you to do many different kind of sins, even the sins in worship. So how do we, it makes you run from one worship to another without trying to actually properly establish yourself in that worship and to be really connecting with Allah. And that's our problem today. We're doing tumultuous amount of worship, but there is no connection in it because we are busy. And then there is the kathara, the whisperings of the malaika, which is, mashallah, it guides you to do one thing which is good, to another thing that is good, and the kathara from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Yeah. My apologies, I'm not sure what happened, but I've lost internet connection. So to be able to actually to differentiate this kathara. Can you hear me now? Okay. And so this is really important for us to be able to differentiate that. And then work one's way up towards al-laduni. This is kashaf. This is where, so this is knowledge, but it requires this is all knowledge. It requires spiritual work. It requires, us to be disciplined. It is not just we imagine, it's not a waham. It is not a waham, but it is a state of reality, a hakika of a person. Right? And Imam Ghazali says, knowledge of spiritual realities is the highest form of knowledge. Right? It depends on intuition. So mukashafa. So I like the word here, important. Mukashafa. Kashafa is intuition. So intuitional knowledge is the highest form of knowledge. Intuitional knowledge is the highest form of knowledge according to Imam al-Ghazali rahmatullah alayh, but comes differently to different people. To some it comes slowly through a good deal of self-cultivation, mujahada, while to a few it is revealed directly. This is up to Allah, this is rizq min Allah. So for some people, they need time, they do the mujahada, and in the struggle to create that adab between themselves and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But for some group of people, they can come just like that. Whatever it is, it must be based on knowledge of the Quran and the Sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And that person must be able to differentiate, is this really from shaitan or is this from Allah? Yeah. Initially, intellect is a potentiality for the development of knowledge. Okay, this potentiality cannot be converted into actuality except under two conditions. So it is a potential. Akal is a potential, but in order for it to become an ilm, to be manifested as ilm, you need two things. Firstly, the development of intellect is dependent upon bodily growth. And this is also in Ihya. And secondly, there must be some external cause to excite it into action. Just as there must be something to be seen in the eye is to see. And so which means it comes with, like what Imam al-Haddad has mentioned, with the process of the person entering youth, misal. And when they enter youth, they start to understand knowledge, they understand things. So the development of the jism also means the development of the akal. Okay, number one. Number two, there must be something external that ignites the internal wanting for knowledge. So for here, that is the reason why Imam Haddad has mentioned the importance of seeking knowledge, an example from teachers, from our parents, and having good surrounding, like what he talks about childhood, which we have mentioned. Go back to that. So those are the external, the external circumstance that that ignites the internal. And for that, this is the reason why parents must be educated, must learn about Islam. And here I do not mean Islam in a 6:30 kind of sense, but Islam that is rooted in tradition. How does our awliya live their life? This is the only way. And let me see. Here I have, the first things first is we need to define, number one, let me find this. One minute. I was typing this just yesterday and I wanted to share this one part of it. Okay. Number one, the first thing that we need to define for our children, for ourselves, is the definition of deen. What is deen? Religion. And this concept must be defined properly in two ways: knowledge and lifestyle. What is the deen? And it is not based on what I think the deen is, not on what the parent thinks the deen is, just to get the child to do what they want to do. That's not going to work. The deen is this. This is why we are born in the state of fitrah. We do not need to make our children Muslims. They are already Muslims, but they need to know what it means to be a Muslim. And if you are seeking, right, if you're seeking God, the first thing you need to know, what does it mean? Deen. What does it mean to be a Muslim? When we're very clear about this, Then can we talk about knowing the self? What does it mean? The reality of insan, the concept of insan. Then can we talk about knowledge? And then forward with other things. So the first things first is we need to define for our children and ourselves what is deen, what is Islam, what is Muslim, what are the realities of this Islam and Muslim, going back to the most valuable assets that we have here in this day, in this time, and throughout all time, is the Shahada. Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammad Rasulullah. How are you going to preserve the Shahada? And so this is what Imam Ghazali is saying. Okay. This, I mean, I'm giving the steps to that, what he has mentioned. Okay. Al-Ghazali concludes that all sciences are potentially in the intellect and do not come out without form. Al-Ghazali concludes that all sciences are potentially in the intellect and do not come from without. What comes from without is the occasion that brings them into actuality. This is also in the here. Intellect and knowledge develop with age. This is important. So with Umar, the intellect develops as well because of experience in life. This provided if the person also nurtures himself and gives himself the mujahada, he creates the adabiyah, the life of adab. Amal wa adab. So amal becomes part, amal is now seen as adab, not separated. Okay? Through an experience, intuition, the intellect leads to growth of knowledge. Formal knowledge is innate, while existential knowledge is acquired. But both occur together. In the young child, formal knowledge is implicit. As experience accumulates, it becomes explicit. Existential knowledge, to begin with, is very, very meager and primarily concerned with the material objects and events which are immediately present in experience. Okay, now I'm going to continue reading, not explain too much because I need to come to this point. Okay, this knowledge is once required to store in the form of disposition to be revived and used whenever needed. So it becomes a stored knowledge which we can use it whenever we need it in our experience in life. The next stage is marked by foresight. This is the important. This is how far, according to the development of the person, through knowledge, through mujahada, through mukashafa, they create this foresight in seeing things. Okay, man is able to foresee the consequence of events and act according to them, and not according to the impulses of the moment, which a lot of people today have. Although they have knowledge, they have studied Islam, etc., but it has not created the mujahada, the adab, the discipline, and hence they have not created the foresight, the hikmah to see of the actions or the reaction of their actions. And this is the lacking of today's seekers because of environment, because of the way we live, and the way we accustom our lives to. We're not skillful in the way we do our things. There's no mastery, there's no itqan. When there is no mastery in life, okay, so there's mastery in the things that we do. But the Sufiya also teach us to be masters of our life. And this comes with mujahada, with ma'rifah. So ma'rifah, mushahada, mukashafa, mahabba. And this requires the mujahada, requires the guidance, the irshad, etc. This creates that foresight. Okay. The highest development of the intellect is reached when it understands the true nature of things, from the simplest objects of sense to the ultimate spiritual realities like God, soul, etc. So when when the person understands the inner dimension of himself, can they then try to understand Tawheed. This is where Tawheed is also an experience. It is not just learned. So many people have studied Sifat Doplo, etc., which is important. But what Imam al-Ghazali and Imam al-Haddad is trying to say is, how do you become close to Allah? Where is the mushahada in this? Where is the mukashafa in the Tawheed? This is where the Sufiya comes. So Sufi people are not meant here, they are not here to like solve your problems. These are secondary, because if you already have your ma'rifah and your mukashafa, and you're very clear about your mujahada, you're very clear about your amal, automatically you would know what you need to do. Automatically you would know what you need to do. And that is the reason why some scholars says that the study of logic is for the awam. But for people who have experiential knowledge, through like what Imam Ghazali has mentioned, there is no need for them to study logic, because they already experience it. It is innate in them. But many people still requires the study of logic because we've lost it. And we can see this in today's people when they argue about certain things, about same-sex marriage, etc., about dunya and the important, just hoarding dunya, because we've lost logic tremendously. If we are able to actually understand and go back, and then we'll see logic is much needed. Again, it's because of the decline. And there are many people who are not able to understand the concept of ruh, etc., because there isn't this akal. The akal is not developed because of the corruption of lifestyle that we have. The millah is gone. The millah of Ibrahimiyya, the millah of Abawiyya is gone. Now is the millah of Anawiyya, the millah of the nafs, not the millah, not the lifestyle of Anbiya. Okay? The grades of actual development, however, vary from the experience to an ordinary man to a direct spiritual vision of saints and to the divine revelations of prophets. So that's why we say there are awam, awliya, wa anbiya. And for us, as the awam, we should aspire as much as we can to think like the awliya first, to understand how do they think. And Imam al-Ghazali has provided for us that platform. So Imam al-Ghazali, as much as he is a great Sufiya, he is also one of the greatest theologians. So he, as an awliya, he is able to articulate for us, the people of Awam, like how the prophets think. And that's one of the things why we need to be in touch with the awliya, because they provide for us the intermediary for us to be able to lead a life like them. And if we cut away the awliya, we're cutting away the whole system of Islam. Yeah. So it is not just about veneration of awliya, but it is also inheriting the way they think and the way they understand God. Okay. The development of the heart may be arrested on account of the following causes. Yeah, this is volume 3. Number one, it may be underdeveloped. Example, the heart of a child. So because the heart is not developed yet, not physical heart, but here the spiritual heart is not fully developed, then it is not able to experience this. Number two, sins may have rendered it dark. Like the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, for every any one sin that you do, there is a black spot on the heart. So what we should be doing, mujahada, go back to tawbah. And the methods of tawbah, Imam Ghazali is mentioned in the 4th part of the book. The 4th part. So there's four parts of ihya. The first part of the 4th part is tawbah. So that's where tawbah becomes important. You need to know. So the 3rd part of the book, Mukashafatul Qulub, Imam Ghazali talks about the illusions that are caused by the illnesses of the heart. So he talks about knowledge, then he talks about the inner aspects of Sharia, then he talks about how you should deal with your life. How should you conduct your life? And then he talks about the illnesses of the heart. And he says, these are causing all of these illusions in your life. Then he says, this is now you start your journey. In eradicating and being and adorning yourself with all of these good characteristics. Number three, the heart may be occupied solely with its own purification so that it does not strive towards objects. So some prejudice may stand between the heart and the object. That's number four, a sectarian belief. And number five, a man will be ignorant to know how the truth is to be sought. So basically, the person doesn't have knowledge, and the person thinks that the heart itself is already fine. These are some of the causes of making us يعني ghafla. And number five, the last one is like the person feel there's no need because he's fine, and which is, I feel, evident in today's world because of materialism. And it's very evident. And in fact, I feel being in countries where we're very developed in terms of dunya, having food whenever we want to, having luxury items whenever we want to, etc., it makes a person very ignorant of the journey in life. They don't know the lives of the men. And there's no need for them to seek knowledge, etc. So it becomes just about the botany, the stomach, and sad when life just revolves around that. Ya khair, inshallah. I seek your permission to stop here today, inshallah. Inshallah, I will upload this soon. So tomorrow, do join us for our Majlis of Ahl al-Badr, inshallah. So I hope today's session has given some insights, especially when it comes to the importance of how we should prepare ourselves for the age beyond 40. So it starts before 40 and goes onwards. And then how and what are the tartibs, and how should we sharpen our spiritual intuition so that we can receive this guidance from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, experience Tawheed itself, which then provides an in-depth aspects of knowledge. And then mujahada, the importance of striving, etc. I hope this short session has brought some light and motivation for you in this month of Ramadan, inshallah, to be going back to the Quran again and to look at it from the Imam al-Ghazali perspective this time around, and also the Imam al-Haddad perspective, and Shaykh Abdul Qadir al-Jilani, because in it they receive the mushahada and the mukashafa from the Al-Quran al-Kareem. And this in turn increases their yaqeen towards Allah, and the core of this whole knowledge is the shahada, ashhadu an la ilaha illallah wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, which means that you bear witness there is no God except for Allah, and the Holy Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the final messenger. So, and then this is culminated in the Quran itself. You see in the Quran how someone who has irfan, any deep gnosis of understanding with their aql, this intuition, how would they then see the Quran? And hopefully this is something that we can enjoy when we reach 40 and beyond, inshallah, so that we go back to Allah as someone who knows Him with a heart that is pure, inshallah. Ameen. Ameen, Ya Rabbil Alameen. All good is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. If not, it is from my own self. I seek your forgiveness. Until we meet again tomorrow, inshallah. And yes, there's a physical session tomorrow at the Khanqa. So if you're free to join us, inshallah. And after which we have the Majlis of Ahl al-Badr. And we recite the 330 names of Ahl al-Badr to seek their intercessions, inshallah, and their barakah. And then after that, we'll do with our short tarawih, inshallah. Our tarawih 20 still, don't worry. With short surahs, inshallah. That's how we usually do it. So all of you are welcome, inshallah. Thank you. And if you'd like to support us, supports do mean a lot to us. So do support us at the PayNow number 86682295. And this will extend our work that we do, inshallah, and to reach out to more levels of community and societies. Thank you. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.